Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday. I want to ask you the same question that I asked at the start of Professor West, which is, you know, we've got the Arbery shooting, we've got that awful incident in Central Park, and then we've got this devastating video of what that white police officer did to George Floyd. Same question. What is going on?
Well, there's no doubt that what we're having the opportunity to see is the absolute devastation of too many African-American males over too many decades, frankly. George Floyd, thankfully, was in a position where people were able to film it and video it, and that's why we were having this conversation. Had it not been for someone videotaping this, it would not have happened. If it had not been for Mr. Arbery being videotaped, it would not have happened. Even though it happened, none of us would have known about it. The Walter Scott case in 2015, had it not been for a video, it would not have happened. And when you read the police reports, you come to the conclusion that it didn't happen the way it happened until you have a video that substantiates what it is. And perhaps, Chris, what we should focus on, as you said earlier, was the New York City woman who said to the Harvard black man that I'm going to call the police and say my life is being threatened. What that says is that there's a lower value on an African-American male life than it is on a white woman's life. And that is part of what played out there, and
Senator,
that is part of the significant
Senator, let me pick up on that, because this does seem, sir, to be a systemic problem. And I want to put up some numbers that indicate that. Young men of color are 2.5 times more likely to die at the hands of police than white men. And police use of force, this is astonishing to me, is the 6th leading cause of death for young men of color. How do you explain that, sir?
Well, I can only explain that by saying that there's too much abuse within law enforcement towards African-American men. I have been a victim 7 times stopped in 1 year as an elected official just driving while black. So I'm not going to pretend that there isn't a major racial component, but what I will suggest to you is what I believe is actually happening. Thank God for video. Thank God for film. Thank God for this conversation that we're having today. And thank God we're having it in America, because if you weren't not in America, you probably couldn't have this conversation. It is not a binary choice, progress or regression. You can actually have both at the same time. We're seeing a lot of goodwill. We're seeing a diversity in the protests that we did not see in the 60s. John Lewis would be proud of the nonviolent protesters that we're seeing today, black, white, red, and brown. What he would say, and what I am saying, what he did say is that any violence in the midst of these protests simply takes away from the actual issue, which is that George Floyd lost his life. It looked like murder to me. Let's get the investigation started and finished so that we will have more confidence in a legal system that we can all say this is a system where the woman has a blindfold on.
Senator, I want to follow up on something that Professor West said, which is that, you know, we have to talk not only about what is going on in the riots in the street, we have to talk about what is going on among people at the highest levels of our society. And I want to put up some tweets that were sent out by President Trump this week. The first one, this was about the riots in Minneapolis. These thugs are dishonoring the memory of George Floyd. Any difficulty, and we will assume control. But when the looting starts, the shooting starts. And then I want to put up another series of tweets, Senator Scott, and these were after there were protests that turned violent at the White House on Friday night. The president praised the Secret Service. He said, nobody came close to breaching the fence. If they had, they would have been greeted with the most vicious dogs and the most ominous weapons I have ever seen. Many Secret Service agents just waiting for action. We put the young ones on the front line, sir. They love it. And good practice. Now, obviously, Secret Service has to protect the president. But, you know, you're not as old as I am or Cornel West, but you have seen racial tensions in this country. When you hear about the looting starts, the shooting starts, when you hear about vicious police dogs, is that kind of talk from the President of the United States constructive at this moment?
Well, those are not constructive tweets, without any question. I'll say this. I spoke with the president yesterday morning, and he and I had a good conversation about what are the next steps. I told him what I'm going to tell you. which is, Mr. President, it helps us when you focus on the death, the unjustified, in my opinion, the criminal death of George Floyd. Those tweets are very helpful. It is helpful when you say what you said yesterday, which is that it's important for us to recognize the benefit of nonviolent protest. It is helpful when you respond to my request to have the Department of Justice, led by Attorney General Barr, have a commission and a conversation around race and justice in this nation. Mr. President, it is helpful when you lead with compassion.
But Senator Scott, I've got a minute left. Did you speak truth to power? And did you say to him, when you talk about thugs, when you talk about looting and shooting, and you talk about vicious police dogs, what did you say about that?
I used the similar words that you just used, which was we talked about the fact that there is a constructive way to have a dialogue with the nation in this similar fashion that we had a conversation after Charlottesville. The president will listen if you engage him with the facts of the issue, and then you ask him to focus on his attention on making progress as one nation under God. I think his tweets yesterday were far more responsive after the conversation. I'm thankful that we can have that conversation. We don't always agree. I didn't agree with some of his tweets beforehand, but we had the ability to sit down and dialogue on how we move this nation forward and not let the detractors get in the way of what has been a pretty phenomenal couple of years economically.
Senator Scott, thank you.
Yes, Chris.
Thanks for coming in today. Always good to talk with you, sir.
Thank you.